I've always loved pirates. The Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy are some of my favorite movies of all time. And yes, I mean trilogy, we don't talk about those other two. But the portrayal of pirates in media is far from accurate when it comes to the lives of real people who engaged in piracy. In fact, the life of a historically accurate pirate, though it was riddled with crime, was actually much more complex than most media makes it out to be. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Historidame, and today we're learning all about the life of a real-world pirate. First of all, pirates have been around for hundreds of years, and have a rich and diverse history all across the world. In this video, I'm going to be looking specifically at the Golden Age of piracy, which spans roughly between 1690 to around 1730. This is generally the most well-known period of piracy, with the depiction of many pirates in media being based off the ones that lived during the Golden Age. During the 17th and 18th centuries, European colonialism was spreading further than ever. As European powers like England, France, and Spain rushed to see who could pillage and conquer the rest of the world the fastest, many conflicts that resulted from this impacted the lives of everyday citizens. Power struggles, poverty, unemployment, and poor governing in colonial states made people desperate for change. This combined with the fact that places like the North Atlantic and Indian Ocean were flooded with vessels carrying valuable goods, caused more and more people to turn to piracy as a way to support themselves, and to escape the poor quality of life that was present in many European cities. People had all kinds of reasons for becoming a pirate. Many came from desperate circumstances, such as those living in poverty who could not find work anywhere else, those running from the law such as criminals or escaped slaves, and sometimes even those sailing as a part of the Royal Navy, who got tired of the poor treatment aboard military ships. Others might have become pirates through force, after their vessel was raided and survivors were made captive and incorporated into the crew. Pirates were also quite progressive when it came to matters of race, with crews not shying away from employing people of color. Though during the Golden Age of piracy, the majority of pirates were European. A life of piracy was not easy, but for some people it provided a much better alternative to making an honest living, especially for marginalized individuals. Life on a pirate ship afforded people better working conditions, decent wages, a fair and competent leadership structure, and for some, even the ability to become exceptionally wealthy. Despite what popular media would have you believe, pirates were not this chaotic group of people pillaging the high seas and raiding coastal towns. Yes, their way of life involved a lot of crime, but they didn't go out of their way to engage in risky and unnecessary conflicts. A crew didn't just jump into battle without a plan. This would be a waste of time and result in casualties that could have been easily avoided. Instead, raids were carefully calculated and planned out ahead of time. In fact, a lot of successful ones went down without any fighting at all. Since pirates mainly attacked merchant or trading vessels, most sailors aboard wouldn't be trained fighters, and many would prefer to surrender when approached by a pirate ship, rather than risk losing their lives. In cases like these, the pirates would negotiate with the other ship's quartermaster, and only somewhat violently demand that they hand over all their valuables. Of course, there were still many cases in which it did come to violence, and pirates did not shy away from acts of brutality to get what they wanted. They were known to set opposing ships on fire, or even capture members of their crew and force them to become pirates themselves. Most of the things stolen during these raids were not the typical golden jewels that you'd see in a treasure chest. These would of course be appreciated if found, but most of it was valuable trade goods like silk, spices, and tobacco. Many other things that a pirate crew stole were actually items that they needed for their own survival. Food, alcohol, supplies, pretty much anything that they needed on a daily basis. Treasure wasn't typically buried either. Most people who were involved in piracy were in it for the money. So once they acquired their share of the spoils, they spent it, and they spent it fast. But the average life of a pirate did not involve stealing and plundering every day. Between raids, the majority of their time would be spent aboard the ship. And unfortunately, living conditions at sea were not great. A pirate ship may have provided better perks than one in the Navy, like higher wages and access to valuable goods, but you were still living on a wooden boat for weeks or months at a time. With dozens of men crammed into the same space, living conditions were crowded, and privacy was nearly impossible to come by. Boats at the time had limited options when it came to cleanliness, which meant that they usually ended up smelling pretty bad, especially in the lower decks, when waste, urine, and seawater all leaked through the levels of the ship and pooled at the bottom. There were also issues with vermin such as rats that got into pretty much everything. It was also impossible to keep anything dry, since bad weather could cause flooding in the ship, and sailing on deck would result in your clothes remaining eternally damp without any time to dry off between shifts. As you might imagine, cramming dozens of sweaty, wet men into an environment that was chock full of rats and filth meant that they were pretty much living in a floating version of a high school boy's locker room for weeks at a time. And honestly, that should be one of the 9 circles of hell. When it came to a pirate's diet at sea, it was actually better than that of the average sailor. Since they were constantly looting other vessels, they had regular access to fresh food, making them less likely to develop a condition from malnourishment, such as scurvy. Aside from what they could steal, however, a pirate's diet consisted mainly of foods that were easily preserved. This included plenty of pickled vegetables, legumes, dried or smoked meat, and of course the staple of a man's diet at sea, hardtack. Livestock may have also been kept on board some ships, to provide things like eggs, milk, and cheese. These animals could also be used for meat later, when supplies began to run out. But life at sea wasn't all bad. Part of what made a pirate's lifestyle alluring was not their physical living conditions, but rather the social hierarchy and egalitarian values that were employed on the ship. If you followed the rules, being in a pirate crew meant that you experienced fair treatment, thanks to something known as the Pirate Code. Despite their reputation for being chaotic and brutal, pirates actually followed a very strict code of behavior. Also referred to as the Articles of Agreement, these were a set of rules established on a pirate ship that helped keep order while simultaneously ensuring worker benefits. At the time, conditions aboard a Royal Navy ship were very unfair for the average sailor, since many members of a pirate crew turned to piracy after previously being sailors or privateers. The Pirate Code was designed to create a system that was more fair than the alternative. Some major tenets of the code included the ability for every crew member to vote when making important decisions, and the fair distribution of wages and supplies. Pirate codes also included laws for behavior aboard the ship, such as not killing or stealing from other crew members. Some captains, like Bartholomew Roberts, had stricter rules, prohibiting gambling and drinking after lights out. Other rules included those around safety, such as keeping your weapons clean and not fighting with the other men aboard the ship. Punishments were pre-established for anyone that would break these rules, including the captain, and could range anywhere from being flogged or shot to even being keel-hauled, where someone was tied to a rope and dragged under the bottom of the ship to be cut by the sharp barnacles underneath. But serious infractions would result in the worst punishment, being marooned. This is where you would be dropped off on a small island with a tiny amount of food, water, and a pistol with a single shot. I'm sure you can figure out the rest. The Pirate Code even included benefits for crew members, where they would be compensated handsomely in the case of severe injury, such as needing to have a limb amputated. But perhaps the most notable aspect of the Pirate Code was the ability that the crew had to elect their captain. Though this was not true in every case, the average pirate ship employed a democratic system, where roles like the captain and quartermaster would be decided by popular vote. Since these were men that were living outside the law, they were not afraid to turn to mutiny if leadership did not have their best interests at heart. That meant that not only were pirate captains chosen by the crew, but they were motivated to keep them happy. A good captain would be charismatic and experienced in sailing, with a strategic mind for planning raids. The success of their exploits and ability to keep things running smoothly would largely affect the captain's ability to stay in power. After all, if they proved to be a poor leader, the crew could easily maroon them and elect someone else. All in all, the life of a historical pirate was truly an interesting one. Though their real lives are far different from the archetype that we are familiar with today, pirates were a progressive group of people with ideas that were very radical during their time. Though real history might not be as exciting as the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, piracy provided people with freedom amidst a society that was built on unfairness. It's no wonder that the idea of being a pirate has become so beloved. Hey everyone, thank you for watching! If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or a comment down below. If you want to see more content like this, you can also subscribe to my channel, and keep up to date on all the fun history videos of the future. But for now, I bid you farewell.